Dan Balz is chief correspondent at The Washington Post, its former national editor, political editor, White House correspondent, and Southwest correspondent. He is also co-author of Storming the Gates and the New York Times bestseller, The Battle for America, 2008. Dan Balz appears also on the news show Meet the Press from time to time and also on the PBS program Washington Week. In April 2011, Dan Balz was honored by the White House Correspondents Association with the prestigious Merriam Smith Award for excellence in presidential coverage under deadline pressure. He's a graduate of the University of Illinois and served in the United States Army from 1968 to 1971. His latest book is called Collision 2012, Obama versus Romney and the Future of Elections in America. When I was in high school, growing up in the Washington area and developing a lifelong interest in politics, I read Theodore H. White's outstanding series, The Making of the President, about the elections of 1960, 1964, 1968, and 1972. I was fascinated by the blow-by-blow accounts and vivid descriptions of the personalities of John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon, Lyndon Johnson, Barry Goldwater, Robert Kennedy, Eugene McCarthy, and George McGovern. And I think the vividness of Theodore H. White's writing inspired me to devote my career to running for office and serving in elected office. Theodore White is no longer around to chronicle presidential races, and it falls to Dan Balz and others to carry on that tradition. Peggy Noonan of the Wall Street Journal said, Dan Balz's Collision 2012 is the best presidential campaign chronicle in many years. It's a great book, in part because it isn't about what happened as much as it is about how people in the campaigns were thinking. Al Kamen from the Washington Post said, the behind-the-scenes reporting throughout, heck, the Christie chapter alone, makes the book a must-read. It was a fascinating ride. I think the real value of this book may come not so much now, because many of us who read Mr. Balz's reporting daily and other contemporaneous reporting may already know the fundamental details of the 2012 race, although this book provides in-depth commentary and interviews that were not reported in the day-to-day press. But I think the real value of this book, like its great predecessors by Theodore H. White, will come a decade or more from now, when some future high school student with an interest in politics reads this account to inspire lifelong involvement. I think this book is that good. I think it will survive for decades to come. And I hope you will help me graciously welcome Dan Balz.
Hello, everyone. It's a delight to be here. This festival has such a wonderful feel about it. Book readers are great people. I remember when Haynes Johnson and I did our book about 2008, and at one of the first appearances we did after it was published, Haynes, who had written 14 books and 5 or 6 or 7 bestsellers, I had at that point written one, kind of embraced one of our early audiences and said, this is why authors write books, to see people like you who come to want to find out more about why we've written it, who are interested in the subject, who read books all the time. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to the folks who organized this wonderful festival. And George, thank you for that very, very generous introduction. George said that this festival is designed to kind of raise the intellectual level of things. I'm not sure a discussion about contemporary politics qualifies for that, but we will make the best of it over the next few minutes. I want to talk about this book, Collision 2012, a little bit about how I put it together as a way to talk about what happened in 2012. As I said, I co-authored a book about the 2008 campaign with now the late Haynes Johnson. And when we set off to do that book, our belief was, and I think it was borne out, that this was going to be a history-making election. At the point we signed a contract to do the book, we didn't know how it was going to turn out, but we knew that there was the possibility of either the first African-American Democratic nominee or the first female Democratic nominee, and that whoever became the Democratic nominee would have an advantage heading into the general election, because after 8 years of the Bush administration, people were clearly ready to go in a different direction. And that was, in so many ways, a campaign that not only made history, but that was inspiring to a lot of people. And I remember, even on Inauguration Day, people who had streamed onto the mall to witness that moment of history when Barack Obama took the oath of office, and that people who had voted for John McCain, who would talk about it months afterwards. Some of them would say, I voted for McCain, I really wanted John McCain to win, but I felt good about the country at that moment in 2009, that we had broken a barrier, that we had done something historic. Well, when I set off to do this book, and this was sometime in the middle of 2010, as I was talking to my agent and talking to the publishers about doing a second volume, I mean, I think everybody had the same feeling, which was, how in the world will 2012 live up to 2008 in terms of a story? I mean, all elections are interesting, but a few are very interesting, and some, frankly, in terms of books about them, would be duds. And those races generally don't get books written about them. And I think that a lot of publishers felt, and my publisher at that moment, I think, felt the same way, that what are we going to be able to do with this book that would in some way or another match 2012? Because as we were, 2008, as we were heading into 2012, I mean, the country was in a very sour mood. President Obama was in a much different place than he had been in 2007 and 2008 and for the first few months of 2009. The country had repolarized, the economy was still struggling, and everything pointed to a sour and quite uninspiring election. And as it played out, it certainly was a different election than we went through in 2008. It was a much grittier election. It was a more negative election. And I think when we got through the election, a lot of people were kind of at that point of, all right, that's done, let's put it in the rearview mirror. But I was left to write a book about it. And as I sat down and was doing the last round of interviews, which you always have to do with a book like this, the post-election interviews, which are always the most revealing, because at that moment, people will begin to be at least a little bit more forthcoming than they were as I would talk to them during the campaign. But as I went through that round of interviews and got through the process of writing the book, I came to the conclusion that in many ways, the 2012 election told us more about who we are as a people, where we are as a country, and what the nature of our politics at this moment is really like than the 2008 campaign. We now look at the 2008 campaign as perhaps an aberrational moment. I think many people thought at the moment that Barack Obama was elected, perhaps we were going to begin to turn a corner on the kind of polarized politics that had begun during the Clinton administration, had intensified during President Bush's administration, and that perhaps a new generation politician like Barack Obama could take us, if not to this kind of gauzy post-partisan world, at least to a place where the country would begin to come together. That obviously didn't happen, and I think that as a result of that, what I tried to do in this book was to give as kind of honest a representation of how the campaign played out, and in some ways why it has contributed to the moment we are still in, which is a moment of depolarization in our politics. I called this book Collision 2012 for three reasons. First, it was a clash of two Americas. It was a clash between the America that elected Barack Obama in 2008 and the America that 2 years later turned out and put Republicans in charge of the House of Representatives, put Republicans in charge of many governorships and state legislatures around the country, and in fact brought us to this point of even more contention in politics. The real America roaring through. The second reason I called it Collision 2012 is that it was clearly a clash of two